Good morning, everybody. Firstly, I need to make an apology that you won't be seeing me on the screen this morning. I am struggling with COVID, I'm afraid, and I don't look too clever. I'd much rather you see a lovely sort of Christmassy photo with tinsel than me personally this morning. But I am here live, and I will do my best to get through this presentation in 30 minutes. So thank you for joining, and thank you, Sue, for inviting me to talk as part of National Divorce Week to this group and beyond. And today I'm going to talk about divorce being your business. As Sue mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders of the Family Transition Company. But I'm the director of Jam HR, so I'm an HR consultant in the main. But I'm going to talk about the effects of relationship breakdowns on workplace culture. So more from a sort of company corporate perspective for both large and smaller employers. And I'll be covering sort of aspects of HR, talk a little bit more about culture at work, and then move on to sort of spotting the signs of relationship breakdowns in the workplace, and then talk about how we can support such employees going through a breakdown at any time, with various mechanisms, but including sort of policies that we can put in place also, such as relationships at work policy, and just general support mechanisms for them. So there are some very sort of proactive things that employers can do to support their employees at this difficult time in their life. So that's sort of the introduction. So I'm so breathless with COVID, you must excuse me. I'm a specialist HR consultant. I've been running Jam HR for 8.5 years, but I've been in the HR world for over 30 years, and worked for all kinds of organisations, mainly big organisations in my corporate career, and now in Jam HR I work for much smaller organisations across most sectors actually, and quite a large geography within the UK also. Jam HR covers all aspects of HR for small to medium-sized businesses. I wanted to work locally for smaller organisations who didn't know who to turn to for HR support, and I guess my specialism is the legal side, the contracts, the policies, the handbooks, the giving of advice, the supporting of owners, directors, MDs, etc., in managing their people. But it depends on the company. Some companies I do more strategic work. For other companies, I do a lot of basic admin. It's really, you know, whatever the company needs are and their size and so forth. So my passions in life are people, always have been. I always remember my mum relating a story about, you know, why don't you go and help wash up? No, I don't like washing up. Why don't you help with some gardening? No, I don't like gardening, and so on and so forth. And she, in exasperation, sort of said, what do you like then? And I just said, I like people. And apparently I was about 4 at the time. And so obviously that stayed with me. I'm passionate about piano, and as a hobby, I teach about 11 children in an evening, and I love seeing them develop and inspire them to have a passion about music and creative things, and as a way of winding down as well. I've got quite a few doing GCSEs at the moment, and it's just like, just turn to the piano to de-stress during these difficult times for you with all your revision. And I'm also the church organist in my local village in South Wales. Qualification wise, so as you'd expect, CIPD qualified, which is the HR recognised qualification and body, a master's in business administration. So not just HR, I do give sort of general sort of business advice also to MDs. BA honours in French, and I love all things French. I love going to France, love the food, love the wine, love the people, and I love speaking it. Although fluent many years ago, it's you do lose it when you don't go there as frequently as you'd like to. And I'm also qualified, obviously, to teach piano, and associate of the London College of Music. So enough about me. Let's turn to the subject of this morning, and some stats for you. But I couldn't miss out this lovely noun about what does HR actually do. And I still get asked it, always have been asked it, and it's really interesting how HR has evolved over even the 3 decades that I've been in it. When I started out, it was sort of tissues, hand holding, admin, that type of thing. And then everyone became sort of HR business partners and tried to align HR strategies with company strategies. And even today, it's changing. It changed through COVID, where we battled with how we could get our employees to work effectively, and hybrid working and home working and all those things. So it just evolves all the time, and it's the challenge is also really keeping up with employment law, which changes literally 4 times a year, and keeping on top of everything that we need to in order to advise our clients correctly. But we are unofficial lawyers. We do get sent a lot of legal stuff to deal with, employment law. We are psychologists. We can be event planners. We're definitely teachers, trainers, coaches for line managers and supervisors. We can be peacemakers, we can be negotiators, we can be mediators, career planners, and detectives as we delve into investigations and the like. So quite a generalist role, unless you specialise in one specific area. So sort of specialising now with Sue and Tom as part of the family transition company. We're looking at divorce separation in the workplace and specialising in that area. So you're probably familiar with some of these stats, which we have shown before, but over 100,000 divorces a year in the UK. That doesn't include unmarried cohabitant parents and family. So at any one time, there are 100,000 divorces going through various channels. 10% of the workforce will be going through a breakup, a separation, or divorce each year. That figure just astonishes me. That at any one time, 10% are of people that we are surrounded by on a daily basis, are potentially struggling, are lost, need somebody to talk to, need somebody to be kind, etc. It's a huge number. And 40% drop in workplace productivity for an average of 2 years as a result of the mental upheaval of divorce and separation. 80% of employees said they had little to no support from employers. And I don't think that's because employers don't want to help and support their employees. I think it's more a case of they don't know how to, and we've never looked at this area, from an employment perspective across the UK, and employers not quite sure where to turn to, what to do, how to support, and so forth. And obviously that's something that the Family Transition Company are trying to rectify. 10% of employees going through a divorce either leave or are asked to leave their employment, which is a sad statistic, really. It's as employers try to manage absence, for example, or sort of what they perceive to be disruption at work, or somebody that's unstable in their view, or whatever. And that isn't a good statistic from my perspective. Divorce costs, I think we're all aware, huge sums of money, and costs UK business over 50 billion a year, once you take into account loss of productivity, presenteeism, the cost of absenteeism, the cost of resignation, and then subsequent re-recruitment of those roles, reduced hours, etc. So that's sort of a background picture for you on the effect of divorce and separation in the workplace. Thanks, Sue. If you can just, great, move on. So how do we spot the signs of people going through divorce or separation? Some might overtly tell you, of course, some won't, because it's a very personal thing, and they may be introvert, or they may not be comfortable with the culture of their organisation to talk about such things, so would rather hide it from their employers. So just some things to be looking out for if you're a company director, or a business owner, or a manager, or a supervisor, or anybody where you're looking after people or teams of people. Some of the signs are low moods, negative thinking, perhaps negative comments, a bit more sort of out of the ordinary if they're not usually so negative. You might notice dips in concentration, struggle to stay motivated and productive, loss of their self-confidence and self-esteem, are more tired than usual, or a greater loss of energy than usual, a sadness that does not go away. We all have sad moments, of course, and up and down days, but a sadness that sort of lingers and is ever present. They might avoid others, they might disappear at their lunch breaks or whatever. They might not just want to be around others, and a loss of appetite. So the starting point from an employer's perspective for me is the culture, and surrounding yourself with great people. In the first instance, we don't know who will be affected by divorce and separation throughout their careers, or times spent in our employment. It's obviously, it can affect anyone and everyone. But if we surround ourselves with great people in the first instance through robust recruitment, for example, good advertising, good job descriptions, involving teams in the recruitment of others. So various people are given that responsibility to bring new people in. We have a strong onboarding process. We induct people, we make them feel well. All that is such a great starting point to surrounding yourself with a great team of people who in turn will work so well for you and make the company even more profitable than it may already be. And then the simple sentence which which says, look after your people. So how do we do that? Well, having a great boss is so important in the world of work, and we think that people are in a particular job for mainly pay, which it can be true, particularly right now with the cost of living crisis that we find ourselves in. But people will leave a job because of a boss or a person rather than the rate of pay that they're on. So I'm going to just talk you through sort of some engagement of your people and some tips on how you can look after your people to the best of your capability. So on the next slide, it's about sort of knowing your team, and you think, oh, well, that might be really difficult, but I managed a team of 800 people, and over time you can get to know so many of them in terms of their names or something about them. Even with such a huge number, it is not impossible, if you make that your mission, to engage with the people that you work with. So things like knowing their children's names, or which school they may go to, or something of interest to them. I'm a huge fan of listening to people on the shop floor, so to speak, and things like going back 30 years, I introduced sort of listening schemes. I did work for a very, very good employer who was and a fantastic chief executive who was at the forefront of these type of engagement processes. So we did listening schemes. We got groups of people together because we believed that the managers don't have all the right ideas or the best ideas. It's those actually working in each job who know how to do things better and can come up with some great ideas going forward. Again, it's about don't sit in your office, don't be amongst the people. All this will help to know your people and to know if they're struggling with divorce or separation or any other thing for that matter. But go back to the floor and work with people, and don't be afraid to do any of the jobs that you ask your teams, your employees to do. And then sort of listening groups or schemes, feedback schemes for how to do things better. So this is all part of the the culture of being visible. And it's a very old photo of me, that, and I'm in my early 20s there, and you might be able to guess who I'm working for from some of the signage. But it was where I learnt my craft, and they didn't pay particularly well, but people work for this company and still work for this company because of the way they treat their employees and the way they look after them, the way they involve them, and so forth. And it's all about being present. My job was in HR. I was a people man. I can't remember the job titles actually those days, but in HR. But I spent a lot of my time on the shop floor, being visible. It's not always about being first in or last to leave, and that's not a great culture. But it was prevalent sort of 20, 30 years ago, but now it's all about work-life balance and being more effective in the time that you spend at work. Still relevant, however, is leading by example and earning respect of people, so that they then trust you when they talk to you about personal things, or they trust you in your capability to run a business or a company. So at Christmas or whenever the store was busy and we had literally 25,000 customers coming through the door each week, I would jump on a checkout. I would fill freezers with turkeys, just to get stuck in and not be afraid to show that, you know, I'm here to support and do every job. So that's a real part of the culture, the be visible piece, in order for you to know your employees and to support them in times such as we're talking about today. Excuse me. So other engagement tools and techniques, well, Dress Down Friday is actually an old one. Now it's more like don't come into the office on a Friday, which is completely normal, but was sort of unheard of even 10 years ago. It's not just about pay, but obviously pay parity is important, and paying the right rates for the job, and keeping up to date with equivalent pay scales in your sector, or your industry or your geography. And obviously at the moment, those that pay more, excuse me, are perhaps getting better quality employees. And it's an investment. You know, there is you know, low unemployment, etc. So pay is quite important right now, but equally non-monetary rewards. The simple say thank you, you know, you've done great this week, really appreciate what you do. The celebrating of success. And I actually ran a listening group in Cardiff a few days ago. And it was, you know, what they were saying to me was, oh, can we have a one day where we just say thank you to somebody who's done a great job, and cover for them, and give them the day off, and buy them little things to say thank you. So they weren't asking for the world, but little things like that mean so much to people. And flexi time and working from home, obviously, we're much more familiar with over the last 3 years. Okay. So legally stuff. So what can we do to support employees going through divorce and separation? Well, from a legal perspective, we can make sure we have some robust policies in place, and I'll touch on some of those in the next slide. But one is having an up-to-date staff handbook, so they know where everything is, they can make it a point of reference. Having a relationships at work policy, and a family transition policy, which is what we have set up as part of the family transition company. These last two, I'm going to just give you a very brief overview on the next 2 slides. So relationships at work policy, it's estimated that a quarter of employees meet their long-term partner at work, and more than half have a personal relationship with a work colleague. And nobody's really surprised by that, given that we spend so much time at work or socialising with our work colleagues. And in most cases, it's perfectly normal and will not present a problem of any kind. But we need to put in place a policy on relationships at work that balance your employee's right to a private life against the company's right to protect its business interests, and that there are areas of overlap. And it's always best to you know, seek HR advice on putting such a policy in place, but it sets the boundaries for the employee and the employer. Ensure that there are effective grievance and anti-harassment procedures in place, so that any allegations following a failed relationship can be dealt with effectively. That's really important. You have your processes so that should that arise, you know the steps to take. However, again, I would always advise you to seek external advice if you don't have HR or a legal team in-house. Be aware that the dismissal of an employee for having a personal relationship at work is highly likely to be unfair and possibly discriminatory also. So you can't just dismiss for having a relationship at work. Take into account that it's unrealistic also to place a blanket ban on personal relationships, and consider guidelines covering personal relationships between employees and clients, customers, contractors, or suppliers. So that's one thing you can do to show that you recognise that there are relationships at work, but there are some ground rules for such relationships within the workplace. And then our new family transition policy. So again, we recognise that nobody had this in the workplace, and its purpose is what we're all here for today and this week, really, in terms of how do we support people going through divorce and separation from a work perspective. Why do we need the policy? Well, the stats tell us some of these things. The feedback from people we know tell us that we need these things, and everybody I've spoken to says, oh God, what a great policy. I wish I'd had that when I was going through a divorce or a separation. We can then advise on eligibility and who would be eligible, sort of considering, for example, things like length of service, the length of the leave and how it may be taken. So again, we would advise you relevant to your business, your company, on how much leave we would advise you giving your employees, and how that's taken in terms of blocks or days, or how much flexibility, etc., without being disruptive to the business, but again supporting the employees. Notification requirements. So what notification would they have to give you to have a day off to go and see a lawyer, for example, to sign something, or to arrange childcare, or whatever it might be. Cancelling or changing leave dates, how would they do that? Because again, it's obviously a fluid process, as I know most of you deal with, and how much flexibility can be given. What about pay? So again, we advise on that, and what we have produced has been seen by government and given a big tick from government in terms of our suggested policy. Terms and conditions, so they're all in there. Provision then of emotional support is in there. So who do I go to for emotional support for my employees as they go through these things? Relationship with other policies, and again, we tailor that to the policies that you have within your businesses, which I'll give you a list on the next slide. And the fact that our policy is government recommended. And if you're interested in that, then please contact myself or Sue with a view to purchasing that policy from us. Okay, so we would link it to your other policies, so some of which you might have. This depends on the size of your business, but there are some key ones that every business should have, in my opinion, so that you can read the list for yourselves, just to save my shortness of breath. But every company, should have, for example, an equal opportunities policy, should have a diversity and inclusion policy, should have a well-being policy as well, and then the statutory policies such as flexible working, parental leave, sick pay, and so forth. So we then link our family transition policy to your existing policies, or we can make them work together and enhance them for you. Next slide. So like I said, government approved, and this is a quote that we had in writing in response to presenting our policy to members of government. The government is committed to supporting employees to manage life events, including family transitions, alongside their employment. Employees already have the right to take time off work to help someone who depends on them in an unexpected event. So we do have dependents leave. Working parents may also use annual leave or unpaid parental leave to help them manage the demands of work and family matters. Furthermore, at the end of last year, the government consulted on amendments to the statutory framework that supports people to request a different work arrangement. So this is the right to request flexible working. It's a right to request. I had such a request yesterday where I explained to the works manager that yes, they have a right to request it, they fill in a correct form, and then your duty as an employer is to consider that request, not necessarily to accept it if you're unable to do so for a specific work reason, but you must fully consider it within certain timescales. The measures sought to bring more employees into the scope of the legislation, better support conversation between the two parties, and make the process of administering requests more responsive to individual needs. And they go on to say they'll publish their response to the consultation in due course. So obviously we've had so many changes in government recently, because our policy was done sort of 6 months ago, but it was approved by Jane Hunt, who was the Minister for Small Business, Consumers and Labour Markets at the time, and David Davis MP, and who is currently the Secretary of State for Wales, who was so positive and encouraging with what we were trying to do as a company to support employers and employees get through the difficult times of divorce and separation. What else can we do? Conscious of time. What else can organisations do to support their employees through a family transition? Well, through the family transition company, they can appoint and train a family transition company. And Sue is the expert on that, having done that with Merseyside Police in the first instance. They can attend a family transition support champions training course. I've talked about the policy already. It's all about being kind. It's about listening to people, all the sort of cultural part that I talked about earlier, about being flexible as well. So yes, we have some mechanisms such as flexible working, but it's just being flexible to listen, to take your time, to give people a sensible time off if they need to deal with things outside of work relating to divorce and separation. Support with the cost of living crisis. We can also provide wellbeing workshops, either in person at the premises of employers or online. And we can help to promote your policies or write your policies or rewrite your policies and assist with the company culture piece. So that's a very whistle-stop tour.